The purpose of this video is to provide you with some tips and tools for completing the History of Scholarship group project. Your job is to use the MLA International Bibliography to study the scholarship trends pertaining to a particular author, and more specifically, the work or works by that author that we have studied in this class. This assignment will provide you the foundation that you need to conduct research like a scholar and to assess the value of your findings from both a quantitative and a qualitative perspective. Here you will recognize the project instructions that I've given you. I've given you 6 different authors from which to choose, and you're going to self-select yourself into a group depending on which author you would like to study. And then you're going to use the MLA bibliography to discern particular patterns in the scholarship pertaining to that author, and then more specifically pertaining to the work by that author that we have studied in this class. So I've given you a list of questions for your group to consider. What themes and patterns do you find in the subject terms? How did the terms vary from decade to decade? When do publications about the author seem to peak, and why might this be the case? And you can also chart any other patterns you and your group happen to notice. Which of the author's works seem to be the most studied or the most understudied? What are some inferences that you might make about this data? And also, what types of literary criticism, like psychoanalytic, feminist, critical race theory, reader response, are most prevalent? With regard to the work on which you're presenting, how does the use of literary criticism vary from decade to decade? So I'm going to walk you through the process of gathering data using Kate Chopin's 1899 novel, The Awakening, as an example. When I teach English 208, I frequently teach Chopin's novel, The Awakening, alongside several of her short stories from the short story collection Bayou Folk. So in this example, I'm going to be focusing primarily on The Awakening, but at the end we'll also look at some selections from Bayou Folk as a way of kind of testing the capabilities and the patterns that emerge from the MLA bibliography. Okay, here we are at the West LA Library webpage. We're going to go to Databases, and then we are going to scroll down to find the MLA International Bibliography. Remember, it's arranged alphabetically. Go ahead and click on it. I am on campus, so it's already logging me in. And what we're going to do is begin by just searching Kate Chopin to see how many results we get. And you'll see here we get quite an overwhelming number of results, 970. Although, trust me, this is not quite as many as you would find for someone like, say, William Shakespeare, whose work has been studied for hundreds of years. But 970 is a very significant number, so we'll want to find a few ways to break that down. So to break this number down, we're going to go to Advanced Search. Now you may remember on an earlier slide I showed you that the older of the two works of Chopin's that we would be examining in English 208, Bayou Folk, was published in 1894. So let's see if we can narrow this down. We're going to go to publication date. We're going to start with the year of publication of Bayou Folk, and we're going to, just for kicks, take it up to 1959. And let's see what that search yields us. A whopping 2 publications. One published in 1933 and one published in 1956. So this is immediately a starting point for us. We can ask ourselves a few questions. Why wasn't there a lot of scholarship on Chopin in the decades following the publications of her works. How might we compare that to scholarship on some of her contemporaries, like say maybe her male contemporaries like Mark Twain or Henry James, right? I think you'll get a sense of where I'm going here. Prior to 1960, more emphasis is placed on white male authors than you would see placed on female authors or authors of color. Okay, so we originally searched from 1894 to 1959. Let's jump 1960 to 1970 just to see what it is that we get when we truncate the search that way. And so all I did was edit the years and click enter. You'll see we have 18 results. Now, I can organize this information in a couple of ways. So I can ask it to give me from oldest to newest. I can ask it to alphabetize by source title. And we can get a sense of not only the trends with regard to frequency of publication on Chopin, but also the types of journals that are interested in publishing scholarship on Chopin. So I want to jump back now to a nice neat slide where I have disaggregated this data. And this is a slide that might look something like that which you could possibly present as part of your group presentation as you're breaking down the data on your particular author and text. So you'll see here I have laid out by years. So beginning in 1960, I go decade by decade, but because, you know, really from the time of original publication to 1959, we only have 2 articles, that's where I start. And you'll see just by looking at these numbers, some interesting trends, right? Scholarship on Chopin skyrockets in the 1970s. Why might that be? Well, if you know your history, you know that the feminist movement picked up steam in the 1970s. The Equal Rights Amendment was very nearly passed as an amendment to the United States Constitution in the 1970s. More women are entering the workforce, and as a result, the academic world starts paying more attention to women's studies, to women in history, women in the world of literature. And you start to see women's studies programs opening up. You start to see feminist theory really occupying a place at the heart of academia. So that is reflected in the scholarship trends we see here. You see that scholarship on Chopin peaks at almost 300 in the 1990s. Again, we're thinking feminism, we're thinking social and cultural trends that might be influencing the popularity of scholarship and the popularity of Chopin in academic study. However, it isn't just numbers that I want you to focus on. I also want you to do some close readings of the citations themselves. See, for example, the 4 scholarly articles that I pulled from the database here, published in 1976, 74, and 72 respectively. I want you to look at the place of publication, so both the journal and journal origin. Right, and this may require you to do some Googling. So if you're not familiar with the journal Feminist Studies, you might want to Google it and learn a little bit about the history of that journal, where it's located, what kinds of work it publishes, etc. So the 4 citations here represent 2 of the primary journal categories for Chopin during this period. You see American literature, both as a journal title and as a subject term. Feminist Studies and Signs, which are both feminist journals. Now, if you continued looking at the journals that were publishing Chopin scholarship during the 1970s, you'd see a lot of regional journals such as Southern Studies, Southern Quarterly, etc. which makes sense given the fact that Chopin was known as a regionalist during her time, meaning that she wrote about the place in which she lived, which was New Orleans, the American South. So it makes sense that Southern journals would be interested in focusing on her work. Paying attention to details such as these and making inferences based on this data can give you a sense of the evolution of scholarship on Chopin's work. Now, this project has the potential to lead you down a series of rabbit holes, and that's okay as long as you give yourself enough time. The more time you spend Googling journals and looking up terms that you don't know, the more information that you have at your disposal to perform a critical analysis that will enable you to explain to your classmates and to me what trends and interesting facts you have gleaned during your research on your selected author. So continuing on the theme of doing close readings of your citation findings, I've created a slide here that breaks down peer-reviewed scholarly articles in a 20-year period from 1960 to 1979 with the additional limiter of only full-text sources. And you'll see that I've kind of mapped out trends in my findings. So what I've done here is I've listed all of the journals that published work by Chopin in that 20-year period. You'll see that American Literature published 6, Southern Literary Journal published 4, Studies in American Fiction published 2. I could also present this information in a different way, grouping it together by journal subject type. So I have several journals here, because I've done my homework on the journals, that publish scholarship on American literature, specifically literature that is thought to be kind of central to the American literary canon. So that would be American Literature, American Quarterly, and Journal of American Studies. Well, if I add those together, then I have 8 journals that have published collectively on Chopin specifically as an American author. I could also group together the feminist journals, which would be Feminist Studies, Signs, and Feminist Quarterly. So collectively, those 3 journals have published 3 works that examine Chopin's literature from the perspective of feminism. You kind of see where I'm going here with this. You can see that the fortunes of Chopin are connected to the gradual institutionalization of feminism in the university departments following the feminist movement of the 1970s, as well as the fact that her work has remained embedded in studies that focus on regionalism, right? Southern Literary Journal. To get ready for your presentation, you'll want to begin by dividing up analysis of the MLA bibliography search results among your group members. There are a number of different ways that you can do this. You can divide it up by years, by subject terms, types of journals, etc. This is something that you will have to decide with your group as a group. You may find it instructive to try comparing the search results for your author with another author who published around the same time. For example, the results for someone like Walt Whitman would differ substantially from the results for a writer like Harriet Jacobs. You can also try comparing your results with those from another database like JSTOR. MLA focuses primarily on literary scholarship. JSTOR houses scholarship from a variety of different academic disciplines. In addition to providing a quantitative analysis by showing us numbers in the way that I have in the preceding slides, you'll also want to provide a qualitative analysis by sharing at least 4 citations representing main trends, interesting divergences, and outliers. For example, is there criticism on your author published in languages besides English? What might this represent? Learning to find and pay attention to what doesn't fit a pattern becomes crucial when it comes time in future classes to develop your own research projects and follow your own line of inquiry. For example, a search inquiry using the term Kate Chopin and her 1894 short story collection Bayou Folk as subject terms only yields you a handful of results. However, if you replace Bayou Folk with Desiree's Baby, which is the title of perhaps her most popular short story from that collection, you'll see that the search expands to 26 texts. So I've disaggregated this data here by decade. And then I've also further narrowed it down by looking at subject categories, which you learned how to do in one of the previous MLA bibliography tutorials. So I do encourage you to delve deeper into those subject categories as you're doing research for this assignment. Now, you certainly don't have to read 26 articles. Maybe you just read a handful, several. I do encourage you to read abstracts as you're narrowing down your research, particularly as you're starting to look at subject terms, maybe skim some introductions and conclusions, but you're kind of giving us a bird's eye view of the history of scholarship pertaining to your topic. Now, if you have any questions, I encourage you to get in touch with me. I have office hours. I am happy to set up a group Zoom meeting for your group so that you guys can ask me questions all together. I know that group projects can be challenging, which is why I have you submit not only your group presentation, but also your individual slides. So I will be considering how you work together as a group, but also grading you on your own merits. But I really hope that you can develop trust and a sense of camaraderie with your group members as you learn to do something new, which is always a little bit scary, but I think in the end will be rewarding because you are developing skills that you can apply to other subjects, other disciplines, and future projects down the line. So I look forward to seeing what your research yields, and I will talk to you all soon.